Right, well, we might as well begin. So there's only a few of us here, so there might be a lot more people dropping in. Welcome, first of all. So I'll just introduce myself to those of you anyone listening or who doesn't know me. So I'm Damien Rocks from Stars Like You, and this is our first, if you like, free or introductory class into the world of astrology. What I was hoping to do today is give you the opportunity to ask me questions, but also just to talk about the absolute foundations of astrology. So the purpose for today is to look at the basics. We'll go over some of the material that you would have seen in the free in the free videos anyway. But importantly, it's an opportunity for you to actually connect with me and ask any questions you want to ask. Depending on how many people end up in the room, that will limit the amount of conversation we can have, of course, but let's see how we go. So for that to happen, I've muted everybody automatically. But if you do want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and just interrupt. There's no need to wait to the end or anything like that. Okay? All right. So let's do it. Let's get into it. So first of all, I'm going to assume that all of you have probably seen the free videos. So if you sign up to the website or over the last few weeks on the newsletter, I've been posting out our videos, which give you a broad overview of the of astrology and how it works. So has anyone not seen those videos? Fiona, Alyssa, Amber, you've all managed to see those?
I'm not sure if I've seen them. I've seen a couple of your videos on the website, but I'm not sure if it's the ones you're talking about.
Okay. Have you joined the mailing list?
No.
Okay, so that might be why. So. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that might be why. Amber?
I have not seen anything.
Okay.
Nothing at all.
Okay. Fiona, I think you have though.
No. I've read the foundations attachment to the enrollment email, but I haven't seen any videos.
Okay, interesting. Okay,
yeah.
So there you go. So you never know. So you guys obviously haven't joined the mailing list. If you had, they would just get automatically sent out to you. So, okay, so we're totally at the beginning. All right. This is real beginning. So what I'll do after today, just send me, just email me after today's chat, and I'll send you a copy of, I've got 4 YouTube clips which go into the basics of the chart. So we look at the mechanics of the chart and what a birth chart actually is. Then the video talks about your sun sign, or what I call your solar story. It talks about something called houses. We look at moon signs and rising signs. And then I also talk about the different ways that you can use astrology. So what you can get out of it essentially. So they're fairly comprehensive, short little videos that give you a great introduction. So today, I kind of assumed that everyone would have seen them. So I decided to kind of move on from that. But seeing as you guys haven't, I'll talk a little bit more about them, okay? But before we get into the detail, I think what's really useful is to talk about what astrology is, because I've been a practitioner, I've been an astrologer all my life really. I started working with astrology when I was very, very young, and had a keen interest, and then became a professional astrologer about 16 years ago now. And one of the things that I've noticed is huge amount of interest in astrology, of course, but also huge amount of misinformation. There's a lot of, particularly online, there's a lot of material out there which is lacking in credibility and lacking in detail, and it makes very, very big generalizations about a topic which is actually very technical and can give you incredible information, but if it's used in a kind of a haphazard way, it leads to really broad generalizations, and it kind of looks a bit silly. I'm sure you understand what I mean. So let's talk about what astrology is, or what it can do, first of all. And so for me, probably the most simple idea is that the patterns which structure the cosmos also structure the psyche. So for me, this is the idea astrology puts forward, and no one knows how or why it works. It's simply that astrologers have been observing for at least 6,000 years that when the planets are in certain relationship with each other or us here on Earth, it tends to correspond with certain states or changes within individuals or nations, etc., etc., etc. So again, the patterns which seem to structure the cosmos also seem to have an impact in terms of our psyche. So it's not like planets make anything happen. So you would have heard about the recent eclipses or Mars or Mercury retrograde. The planets don't make anything happen, but when they form certain patterns, you will notice that there are also specific shifts or changes at a psychological level within individuals or within collectives as well. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah? Yep, good. So that's the scientific basis, if you like, of astrology. It's based on observation. So it's just like weather patterns. It's like reading the weather, okay? So meteorology isn't an exact science. A meteorologist will say, tomorrow the weather is likely to be X degrees. And sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong. But what they're talking about are patterns and how patterns are expected to unfold through time. And it's exactly the same with astrology. So it can't be an exact science. We can't say this is exactly what will happen to you for a number of reasons, which we can talk about another time. But what we can say with a lot of confidence is this is the general area that you're likely to find comes up for you, or there's a focus on, or this is a part of your life where you need to pay attention to, etc., etc. And this is simply based on observation over at least 6,000 or so years, okay? All right, anyone got any questions about that? You okay, comfortable with that? No? Okay.
All good.
Oh, good, all right, nice. It's very easy having only a couple of you in the room. It's nice for me. We can chat properly. All right, so that's the big idea around astrology. Okay. So now let's talk about it at a more personal level, because what we do with astrology is we take that great big picture, so the position of all the planets in our solar system, and we bring it back down to Earth in a way that's relative and unique to you as an individual. So what we all have is we all have an astrology chart, which is a unique map or blueprint that you can work with all your life. So let me ask you, do you have a copy of your astrology chart? Do you know what a chart looks like? Fiona, I can see you nodding. Yeah. Alyssa?
Yeah.
You do? Yeah, great. And Amber, what about you?
Yes, I have my chart and everyone else's, but I don't necessarily know how to read them correctly.
Sure. Okay, good. So you at least have that sense that of what a chart is, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. It's important to understand that your chart doesn't dictate what you'll do. Okay, so it's not like, so let's use the eclipse of the last couple of weeks. Okay, so everybody on the planet experienced the influence of the eclipse, but no one can say this is what will happen to you based on that eclipse, because importantly, we all have free will, and there are many different ways that you can experience or live out a particular symbol or a particular, let's say, psychological trigger. But what it does do is it shows the territory that you're likely to traverse. So what I mean by that is, let's say the eclipse triggered your chart in the area to do with finances, for example. Financial matters or decisions around security is where you're likely to see a focus, but we can't say what you will do with that. There's no way of knowing, okay? So your astrology chart shows the territory or the focus that's important for you, but it doesn't say what you will do, because you always have free will. We always have choice. And when it comes to our personality or understanding who we are, the again, the chart doesn't say who you will become, but it shows your strengths, if you like, your strengths and opportunities, and it will also show areas of weakness and challenge. Okay, so your astrology chart is describing personality strengths that you're likely to develop, and it will show areas in your life where challenge is likely to occur, but what you do with that is completely up to you. Now, within all of that, so getting down to a more detailed level, for all of us, there are basically three major components we need to consider. So, for example, Amber, you may say, I don't know how to interpret a chart, or I don't know how to read a chart. The most important thing, if you're looking at an astrology chart, is to understand three factors, and that is what we call a sun sign, a moon sign, and a rising sign. Okay, so the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. If you're able to understand those three factors in anybody's chart, then you've basically got 70% of the story worked out. You will have the main framework in place. And so that's what we aim to do. And when I'm working with my students, I'm always reminding them not to focus so much on the detail, but to focus on the simplicity. So try and keep a simple structure in place. Try and keep a very simple framework in place, because that way, once you've understood the outline, then you can colour in. But when we try and work out every single aspect before bringing it together, it becomes quite difficult. So my recommendation to you is to focus on the three major components, and then you'll find your understanding unfolds from there. Any questions? No? All good?
Nope.
All right. So let's have a look first of all at what's called your sun sign. All right. So do you all know your sun sign? Alyssa, Fiona, Amber, you understand, you know your sun sign? Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right. Fantastic. So your sun sign is of major significance. It's probably the most important part of your chart. And the reason I would say that it's the most important part of your chart is because just like the sun is the center of the solar system, so in astrology, your sun sign and what we call house, which I'll explain in a moment, that represents the central part of you, the part of you around which everything organizes itself. So when you think of your sun sign, you can think of it as the essence of who you are, but rather than thinking of it as my personality traits, so I'm a Leo and I'm like that, or they're a Virgo and they do this and they do that, which is a very simplistic way of understanding astrology, I would suggest to you that you think of it in terms of motivation. So your sun sign describes what motivates or drives you rather than what you are. And you learn to develop and grow in that particular area of life. So for example, if you have the sun in Aries, it doesn't mean you are independent and you do everything on your own. It means you're learning to understand that process. And it's the same for everyone. So you're learning to develop and become, or you're learning to become more and more aware or conscious in the area of life that your sun sign governs. Okay. So Fiona, does that make sense for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mind
Can you
just
hear me?
sharing with us what your sun sign is?
I'm a Taurus.
You're a Taurus. Okay. So in a moment, we'll look at the qualities of each of the 12 signs. And rather than, so let's say a common thing that you'll hear is, oh, Taurians are stubborn. And people will make these statements about Taurians being stubborn. Okay? Lazy, yeah, these generalizations, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I would make the comment that Taurians are learning about the importance of comfort and stability. And so part of that process is understanding what it means to persevere and to stick with something. So for that reason, sometimes, so Taurians tend to enjoy comfort and like to feel secure. So for that reason can resist change. And so if a Taurian is stubborn, it's not because all Taurians are like that. It's because there's an innate motivation within the sign of Taurus to hold on to what we already have, to maintain security, and so therefore resist change. So it's learning how to embrace change whilst maintaining stability that's often important for anyone born with the sun in Taurus, as an example. So we learn to develop and grow in the areas of life that our sun sign represents. So it's what motivates and drives you. Okay. Great. Hopefully that's clear. Now, as I mentioned, there are three major components. So we're looking at the sun, what's called the sun sign and house. I'll talk about the house in a minute. We're also looking at the moon, so the moon sign and house. And then thirdly, something called your ascendant or your rising sign. Now, the moon is just as important as the sun. So even though I've made quite a big introduction to the sun, and it's the center of everything and everything comes back to it, which is all true, the moon is just as important. So I think if we just use the simple analogy, we live in a world of duality. You know, we've got black and white, male, female, etc., etc. The moon is the polar, is the balance to the sun. So the moon sign represents your instinctive and emotional energy. In lots of ways, your moon sign describes the things that you need in life. And the sun sign represents what you learn to become or what you want. So think of it like this. The moon sign, representing your needs, describes those aspects of your personality which are innate, which you, in lots of ways, which you have inherited. So your moon sign will talk about qualities that you learnt from your early childhood, from your family environment. From that point of view, it also describes in some ways your relationship to your mother and how you would have seen her and connected with her. And because it's what we're taught to do or what we're born with, in lots of ways, your moon sign will talk about qualities that you have always had, you probably don't question or think about too much, and maybe you don't need to learn much about it. Okay? So it's just who you are. And you often find with the moon sign, it doesn't bring up challenges. So when I talked about the sun sign, I said we learn and we have challenges in that area. The moon sign is different. You often don't find that that it brings up an aspect of challenge. You'll often find that it describes what you, as I've said, what you need. So it's what we need to feel secure and safe. And so even though the sun sign might be saying, I need to grow and develop in this way, we also need to understand or give attention to the needs of our moon sign, because this has to be in balance. So ideally, the sun and the moon, or the expression of those two signs, needs to come into balance. And so when you're thinking about your own chart or the chart of anyone that you know, you're always wanting to consider the interplay between the sun sign and house and the moon sign and house, and how those two characters, if you like, would talk to each other. When you go through the introductory videos, you'll see I talk about this idea of thinking of the astrology chart as as a stage, and thinking of the characters, thinking of the sun and the moon as characters. And that's a really useful way to understand the chart. If you can imagine them as actual, living, breathing, acting people on a stage, then you can start to understand how they're going to talk to each other or not. And this is really the essence of understanding your own chart or anybody else's, because it's the interplay between the sun, moon, and ascendant which sets up everything else. So get that first, or get clear on that, and the rest of the chart will just start to reveal itself to you. And so as I've said, we've got the sun sign, we've got the moon sign, and lastly, we've got the rising sign. Now, I won't go into the technical detail of the rising sign or the ascendant now. I'll save that for another video. But just quickly, the rising sign is the sign of the zodiac that is coming up on the eastern, that's appearing on the eastern horizon at the moment of a person's birth. So that's why it's called the rising sign or the ascending sign. It's coming up on the eastern horizon. And this is a critical part of anybody's chart. And in order to know what the ascendant or rising sign is, we need the time of birth. Okay? So this is one of the reasons why a correct birth time is really important. It's not essential. If you don't know your birth time, you can still get a lot of good information from an astrology chart, but you lose a lot of detail as well. And one of the big details you lose is this ascendant or rising sign. Okay. So if the sun describes what you want and the moon describes what you need, a very simple way of understanding the rising sign is how you go about getting it. So the rising sign is describing the kinds of experiences you need to have to make your life meaningful. So it's putting in context. The rising sign is also talking about the way that you project yourself to other people. And then conversely, the way that other people will see you immediately. So this is one of the reasons why, you know, for example, when someone says to me, oh, they find out I'm an astrologer and they say, oh, guess what sign I am? I never do it. Because in most cases, the first impression you get from somebody won't be the qualities of their sun sign. It will be the qualities of their ascendant. We tend to show other people when we come into, particularly into a new situation, we tend to show other people the qualities of the rising sign. And that could be very different from our sun sign. That each of the 12 signs has a different flavor or a motivation, or many different motivations actually. And your rising sign will describe what you project in new situations, the way other people interpret you, and as I've said, the kinds of experiences you'll need to have to make your life meaningful. So a synthesis of those three elements is basically the foundation of good astrological work, good understanding. Okay? So if you're wanting to learn about your own chart, rather than focusing on every single detail that you could find, every single aspect, every single kind of minor planet or point, it's much better for you to focus on understanding the synthesis of those three things. It will give you a much better framework to work with. Okay, so here I have just a snapshot or overview of the 12 signs of the zodiac. And what I'd like to do down the track is actually go into each of the 12 signs in a lot of detail. But just for now, I just want to show this to you, and you might notice obviously we all know our sun signs. So you might just have a quick look at that, because in essence, as I've said, each sign will have its own motivations or drives. And so you can think about your sun sign, so for example, Taurus, as driven by the need to create structure and find comfort. And then there will be a billion different ways of doing that. Okay, or if you're Sagittarius, the need to experience, teach, learn, and be free, and there will be a billion different ways of doing that. So each sign will have its core motivation or expression, and your job, if you like, is to understand how that expression is manifesting in your life story. Okay, so any questions on that? You want any comments or thoughts in reaction to the motivations of the 12 signs? Amber,
sorry.
Fiona? Yep. No, Alyssa. Who was that?
Yeah.
Sorry. Alyssa.
That was me.
Yep.
I just had a quick question about the moon. Is it more important for females, or is it equally important?
It's equally important, and that's a really great question. It's absolutely equally important, and male and female is in essence, all of us are male and female. We all have masculine and feminine components within us. Women will often find it easier to relate to the qualities of their moon sign, and that has a lot to do with culture or the way that we're nurtured and brought up. So women will often find it easier to express the qualities of the moon sign, and conversely, men often find it easier to express their sun sign. And these are cultural things.
Yeah.
But a well-balanced individual will be in touch with both aspects of themselves. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that help?
Cool. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. Amber, were you going to say something?
I think you had asked a question. I can't remember what it was now. I was taking notes. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to know if you wanted to ask anything about the 12 signs, your sign.
No, not, I guess I call these cookie cutter descriptions.
Yep.
I guess I'm one of the people that thinks of the details. I'm a Virgo sun sign, and I think of the details, and so I get confused, and my brain feels like scrambled eggs because I'm a Virgo, the sun sign, but my moon is Leo, my rising sign is Scorpio, but I'm a Libra according to my comprehensive evaluation on my chart. So I'm just like really confused as to how all that fits.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and I agree with you. It's a cookie cutter description. In essence, it is. I mean, trying to say that every human being on the planet fits into 12 categories is nonsensical, really. But even in what you said there, it was interesting. You talked about that you're into the detail and you get scrambled. You know, to you, it gets a bit scrambled, and you want clear information, because if you look at the description for Virgo, you can see that there's the motivation to find practical solutions or to analyze. So if you've got the sun in Virgo, you're going to find that you're driven to get to that kind of logical outcome. You're going to be driven to get that piece of information that you can actually use, and to in lots of ways to cut through the noise.
Right. Noise. Yeah. I hear people talking all the time about how their aspects and their houses and their planets, and I don't have the ability maybe to absorb that type of information. Detailed about
not alone.
Anybody's like my aspects or this and that, therefore I'm insane. I mean, I just don't. When it gets so detailed, I have a problem. That's why I'm listening to you, so that maybe you can instruct me as to how to break it down in my head so that it's not so confusing.
Absolutely. And I'd probably say 90% of us feel that way. Astrology can seem very confusing and overwhelming because there's a lot of detail. And this is why I'm saying to you, forget all of that. So don't focus on every possible aspect. Don't focus on the minutiae of the chart. We really need a practical structure which allows us to look at it in a useful way. And so bringing together or understanding sun, moon, and rising sign will give you that structure. If you can synthesize in your mind, if you can synthesize those three elements, then the rest of the chart will fall into place. Because yes, you may have this little aspect here, and yes, you may have that planet or asteroid there, but that doesn't mean anything unless we put it into the context of the main framework. So bring your focus to your sun sign, moon sign, rising sign, and that will open the door.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Hrovka, I'm sorry, I probably am not saying your name correctly at all, but I've noticed you've joined us, so welcome. If you want to ask any questions or jump into the conversation, just unmute yourself, and we'll go from there. All right, so basic stuff, but really important for understanding. Your question? No? All right. So I'm going to now talk to you about what are called the houses of the chart. So you have, for example, your sun, the sun will be in a particular sign, and it will also be in what we call a house. Now the technical detail again, so this is in the free videos, so I'm not going to go into explaining all of this in a technical way. You can find out later on. So this will be in the second video of my series. It's about, it's in the first one, the mechanics of the chart. It talks about what a house is and how we understand that. So I just want to go over that very, very quickly, just to reinforce how important this is. So I might just jump down to this slide because I assumed you all would have known what a house was, but we'll just cover it again. So the houses of the chart. When we know the time a person's born, we divide the sky into 12 sections, and these are called houses, and they're just as important as the sign. So the houses represent areas of life experience, and they're numbered 1 to 12, and they go around the chart in a counterclockwise direction. Now, those of you who are paying attention will immediately go, hang on, the signs are going one way and the houses are going the other way, and I'm a bit confused and I don't understand, etc., etc. That's okay. An astrology chart is a very simple, very, very simple diagram representing quite a complex thing, because it's showing the orbit of the Earth around the Sun, as well as the rotation of the Earth on its daily axis. So there's actually 2 spinning wheels that chart is representing. And so graphically, it can look a little bit confusing. The purpose of today's class, if you like, isn't to explain all of the detail. The purpose of today's class is just to introduce the idea. So at a very simple level, the houses are divisions of the sky, and we divide the sky into 12 sections once we know the time a person's born. So this is the other key piece of information that you really need, and this is why an accurate birth time is so much better, because it allows us to accurately locate these things called houses. All right. So what you might want to do later on, once we stopped our chat together today, what you might want to do is just go and have a look at your chart and see if you can work out which house the sun and the moon are in, because it's just as important as the sign. So in the example we've got up here, I've got Oprah Winfrey's chart, and I use that as a good example in all of the videos, because we all know who she is, and it's fairly clear how her story has unfolded through time. So here we can see the sun and the moon, the sun, Venus and Mercury, all in this area of the chart. So it's what we call the second house of the chart. As I've said, the house in which the sun is found is just as important as the sign. And so what your house position will do, or let's say your solar house, so the house in which the sun is found, it will talk about the area of life in which you're most likely to want to shine. So all the qualities of your sun sign will be expressed in an area of life. And that area of life will be described by the house. So this is one of the reasons why, you might be a Taurus, let's just go with that again, and you've got 7 other Taurian friends, and all of you will bring your focus to different areas of life, because you probably have your sun in a different house. So the houses bring the, let's say, the broad symbolic qualities of the signs. The houses bring it down into practical everyday reality. And your solar house will talk about areas of focus or challenge for you. And your solar house will describe the aspects of life experience which are probably most important for you to learn and grow through. So the second video in the series talks specifically about your solar house or your solar story. So I'm, again, not going into the detail here. You can check that out later. But I just want to reinforce this notion that the house is just as important as the sign. How are we going with that? Is that okay? Is that clear? Yeah. Anyone got a question about that? No? All right. Cool. So let's use an example. So here we have Oprah Winfrey's chart. And as I said, you'll see these in my free videos because it's a really useful chart to work with. And so all of you have a chart like this. You all have your birth chart as we talked about at the start. And what a birth chart is it's showing the position of the planets in our solar system relative to a particular individual, and in this case, relative to Oprah. So we can see here that Oprah was born on the 29th of January 1954 at 4:30 a.m. Kosciuszko, Mississippi. When we have that information, we can then create this chart, and this chart will give a lot of detail about the areas of life experience that are likely to be important for Oprah, okay? And a lot of detail in terms of how that story will unfold through time. So we each, as of course you all know, we each have an astrology chart, so we can find this information out for ourselves or about ourselves just by understanding the principles of astrology, and that's how it works. So, if we want to pull this apart, you can see here, I'm assuming that you can see my cursor pretty much okay, of course you can. So I'm just doing a circle now around the sun. So that symbol there, the circle with the circle inside it, is the astrological symbol for the sun. We can see that Oprah was born when the sun was in the sign of Aquarius. And because the sun is sitting in this area of the chart, it's what we call the second house. So she has the sun in Aquarius in the second house of her chart. This symbol up here, which will be familiar to us because it looks like the moon, is the symbol for the moon. So we can also see that when Oprah was born, the moon was in the sign of Sagittarius. And it's in the 12th house of her chart. It's sitting in this section of the sky. And we can also learn from looking at this chart that her ascendant or rising sign is also Sagittarius. So if we're talking about any individual, but in this case we're talking about Oprah Winfrey, in order to understand what motivates and drives her, in order to understand her basic needs, where she will feel comfortable, in order to understand how she will express herself out into the world and how other people will see her, if we want to understand all of those qualities, what we need to do is bring together the sun, moon, and rising sign, the qualities of sun, moon, and rising. Okay? All right. We'll probably have time to, I think we will, yeah, we'll have time, yeah, let's talk about that now. So with Oprah, for example, she's got the sun in Aquarius, so that means that she's going to be motivated by broad collective endeavors. She's going to be motivated or driven to think about the community or the society or the collective around her and what her role within that collective could be. So that statement is broadly true for anybody with the sun in Aquarius, and the particular ways that Oprah will go about expressing that will have to do with the other aspects in her chart as well as her life experience. Because she has the moon and rising sign in Sagittarius, this also means that that the things that will be important for her moon sign, will be described by Sagittarius, and the way that she presents herself to the world will also be Sagittarian in flavour. Now, Sagittarius is an energy which is known for enthusiasm, optimism, expansion, and hope. And so, of course, we all know one of the most well-known, let's say, attributes of Oprah is her capacity to see an opportunity in things. She's always inspiring people. She's always wanting to bring new ideas to the surface. She's always talking about potential and how to activate your potential and to follow your passion and to be true to yourself. And these are aspects of the sign of Sagittarius. So you see this very strongly in her nature. So Oprah is a person with the sun in Aquarius in the second house, moon in Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. And these are the strong qualities that we meet in the personality that we know. Does that make sense to you? Any questions on that? No? Okay. Everyone's hopefully just writing notes. All right. So just to finish off, and I know this is a very, very broad outline, but you can get more detail from watching the videos. Just to finish off, I just want to outline to you the importance of the houses in terms of what they represent. So each house of the chart, as I've said, governs an area of life experience. And then depending on the planets that are found in each house, that will then describe how you relate to or live out that area. Everybody has 12 houses within their chart. So if you look at your chart and you see, oh, there's nothing in that house, it doesn't mean that house isn't important to you, and it doesn't mean that you can't do that or you won't do that. There are 12 houses describing the gamut of experience, all areas of life experience. But if you have a planet in a particular house, it means there's a special focus on that for you. So in this case, the sun, if your sun is found in, whatever house the sun is found in, it then talks about an area of focus for you. All right. So 12 houses. Okay, each house with its own particular expression. Rather than going through each of these, I'll just leave them up on the screen for just a moment so that you can absorb them. But just have a think. So do you know, so Fiona, do you know which house the sun is in your chart?
No, I don't.
No? Okay.
No, sorry.
That's okay. That's fine. It's how would you know? You've probably never looked.
I'll have a look at it after the call, but yeah. I don't recall.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone know the house that the sun was in when they were born?
Mine's in the 7th house, I think.
Alyssa, yours is in the 7th. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can pop that up there. So broadly speaking, anybody found with the sun in the 7th house is going to find that their life experiences keep on coming back to the theme of relationship or partnership. And the way that that will happen is through themes of just fairness or justice. So people born with the sun in the 7th house will often find that they're motivated by a need to be fair, to be objective, to weigh up all of the various options in any decision-making process before coming ideally to the middle ground. So if you've got the sun in the 7th house, it means there's going to be a relationship or partnership focus for you in life. And the way that that basically expresses is that there will be a natural tendency to defer to or consider the other. Does that make sense for you, Alyssa?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Without needing to go into too much personal detail, you'll find that as I've said, that wherever the sun is placed, it will then show you a strong area of focus for you. Interestingly, it will also show the area in life which can be a challenge for you. Your solar house also talks about the area of life experience which is very good in terms of vocation or career. So whenever I'm looking at someone's chart and we're discussing their career path, for example, I'm always interested in their solar house, because your solar house will talk about an area of life which is going to feel like a calling for you. And ideally, if we get to work in an area that's a calling for us, we're going to find ourselves much happier in that, and also much better in terms of doing it. Our expression is going to be better if the qualities of our solar house come out through our work. And then lastly, the solar house will also talk about an area of life in which you can give back to others. So once we've learned, for example, through relationship, once we've learned about objectivity and fairness and inclusiveness and partnership, then we'll probably find that we're very good at helping other people do the same over time. So a person born with the sun in the 7th house, for example, in their teenage years and their 20s, they may have a lot to learn about relationships and partnership, but as they grow and evolve, they will often become people who are very good at building relationships and maintaining harmony and equanimity in their relationships, and they may even teach others to do the same. So you'll find that your solar house will talk about 4 main areas of expression. And you'll find that this story keeps on coming up for you as your life path unfolds. But it's really useful because it gives structure. So Amber, for you, for example, to look at the qualities of your solar house will help to give the detail that you're looking for in terms of self-expression.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it typical to split houses, or do you adjust it so that there's one house to one sign?
Okay. That's a really good question. And the answer to that is unfortunately very technical. There are many different house systems. Okay. And there's a huge amount of ongoing debate within the astrological community in terms of which system is best or which one to use. So what you'll find is different astrologers have a different preference. But in essence, what you need to know is that the houses are divisions of the sky. Okay, and the area of the sky that a planet is found will influence its expression in your life story. So if you're wanting to make a decision between is it this house or is it that house, usually the best thing to do is use experience. So if for example, if you weren't sure if the sun was in the 7th or the 8th, or one astrologer said it was the 7th and another said it was the 8th, you could look back through your life story and you could understand the main themes or issues, and that would help you to decide. So I'm sorry, on that particular question, there's not a clear answer. To give you all the detail, it would take another hour of technical explanation. Does that help? Does that help at all, Amber?
Kind of. In reverse, you're saying like if an astrologer says, well, the sun's here or there, like if they're born on a cusp. I was asking more like, what if Scorpio was in first and 12th house were the same Scorpio? That's what I was asking.
Oh, okay. So if you had, yes, I understand. That's possible. Personally speaking, myself, I will give each house its own sign. So for me, the first house will be one sign, the second house will be another sign, the third house will be another sign, which is a very traditional way of doing it. So I do it in a very traditional way. There are other astrologers who might use a different flavor or a different emphasis. Again, it's a really complex question, and it's really hard to explain simply.
Well, that helped actually. It simplified it for me, so I can just like click it so that it's perfect, and then not have to worry about Scorpio. Yeah, okay. So it would just be the first house, and then the 12th house would be something different.
Yes, exactly. And if you do it that way, you'll be following the tradition. You'll be doing it in a time-honored way. So it's okay. Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. So, folks, I'm going to bring this to a close in just a moment. But I just want to remind you, so all we did is we just had a really, really simple look at astrology. And, as I'm sure you appreciate, the chart's very complex, but it's also very simple. So if there's one thing that you take away from today, I want you to remember that the foundation of your astrology chart is a synthesis of the sun, moon, and rising sign. If you can understand those things, you understand 70% of the story. So make that your main priority rather than all of the other bits and pieces that you can include. Okay? Now, the opportunity, of course, is through consultation. So on the one hand, you can get that broad sweep of your chart, but it's the consultation with an astrologer that gives you the full range of expression. And that's why, personally, it took me, 30 years, I guess, let's say 25 years. It took me 25 years to learn to do astrology well. And then it took me another, 10 years practicing full time to become really competent at it. So it's a skill. There's no denying it. And there's a lot of information you can get from that chart when you learn those skills. But at this stage, you guys are just beginners. You're students of astrology. So don't be overwhelmed by how huge that all seems, because as I've said, if you can combine sun, moon, and rising sign, you're 70% of the way there already. So you all know the website, obviously, because you've been there or you wouldn't be joining me today. But if you don't know, maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you don't know, there's a comprehensive description or analysis of your sun, moon, of each of the sun, moon, and rising signs on the website. So if you go to the Astro Profile section, there's a big button on the home page, or if you click on the Astrology, About Astrology nav bar, you can drop down and you can go to the Astro Profile section. If you go there, you'll find a huge amount of detail about each of the 12 signs, sun sign, moon sign, and rising sign. So that can also help you get a handle on it all. All right, so I am going to love you and leave you because I've got a client in about 10 or 15 minutes, so I'll need to get on with that. Any final questions before we say goodbye for today?
Do you have a good career doing this? I mean, is it something that you can do full time and actually support yourself?
Well, I've managed to do that been managing to do that for 15 years now, so yes. Yeah, it is. It takes time, but it's like anything. It truly is an apprenticeship. To become an astrologer requires an apprenticeship. Like if you're going to become an electrician, you've got to spend 4 years learning your craft. It's the same, but once you understand that, you have a really powerful tool to understand yourself and other people. For me, the best thing about astrology is that it helps you to understand what motivates and drives people. And so then you can really, and that information is so useful in so many areas of life. So yeah, absolutely. You can have a very good career from astrology if you take the time to learn it properly.
Damien?
Yeah.
Just a quick one. When does the actual course start? Is it the 27th of August?
Yeah, 27th of August. So if you're interested in joining the next intake, we begin on the 27th of August, online, obviously learning. So we all come together in this kind of format. So it's easy. We can talk to each other simply and share information. So yeah, 27th of August.
I've paid my deposit, so I'm up for it. What time on the 27th Eastern Standard Time, Australian Eastern Standard Time?
7 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll obviously send a link or something beforehand.
Yeah, all that'll come out. Yep, I'll confirm all of that in the next week. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, folks, I think it's time to say goodbye and stop the recording. So thank you very much for joining me. And for those of you who've registered but haven't managed to come today, you'll be getting a recording anyway. So hopefully it makes sense. Any questions, just send me an email. And again, if you haven't got the 4 free videos, then email me and I'll just direct you to the YouTube playlists. Watch all of those. It'll all make a lot more sense.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool.
All right,
Thank
everybody.
you.
So thanks so much for joining me, and have a great day or good morning, whatever you need to do, and we'll speak again soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.